Here we go. We're recording on video now. Gonna hit the record button first. Here we go. What dost thou wish? To continue to exist? Well, dost thou wish to have sensation, movement, growth, and then again to cease to grow? To use thy speech, to think, what is there of all these things which seems to thee worth desiring? But if it is easy to set little value on all these things, turn to that which remains, which is to follow reason and God. But it is inconsistent with honoring reason and God to be troubled by death. A man will be deprived of other things. To be troubled because by death, a man will be deprived of other things. Friends, this is the Formless Podcast, episode number 70, with Tyler, the superhuman, and me, Dustin.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is actually take 2, but I got to remember to hit the record button.
It's okay. Like you said, we're still learning.
We're still learning. We're still figuring things out. Mistakes were made, but that's all right. You know?
Episode 70, we're still figuring it out.
Dust yourself off and keep going. You know, it's funny because like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to Joe Rogan a lot, and he has really interesting guests. I think that is probably one of the coolest, from my perspective, one of the coolest aspects of his show. He always has somebody really interesting. And it's based off of what he's like into. Like he's had historians and Egyptologists on, and like just all very eccentric type people. You know, very eclectic is the proper word, probably. Different interests. You know, martial arts or history or musicians or actors, or just really wonderful different people. And they have a conversation before they start recording. And they always kind of, sometimes they'll allude to it. And it's always like, I'm always like, oh, I wonder what they were talking about. Like, I want to hear that conversation, you know, before they hit record. And we just had one of those. So,
Now we know.
Now we know.
Except we thought we were recording.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were talking about lessons learned from doing the podcast, which is kind of what our topic is today. You know, just lessons that we've learned in life through martial arts, and like, what lessons have we learned in martial arts that we can apply to life? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about that, but in regards to podcasting. And you had said a couple of things, and right this second, I can't remember what it was that you had said.
It was that we started out doing this podcast, and we just said, hey, let's do a podcast with what we've got.
Yeah. And
we then, looking back from where we are now to where we started, and it was this slow progression of like one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know how to do a podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the awesomeness of it.
Well, and not having anybody like to go to. Well, we had people to go to, but like not like for this specific thing. Like, whereas like if you're learning a new skill, like if you learn how to swim or how to drive, you know, you have a teacher. You have somebody that's like, okay, now you got to put this arm over and this arm, you know, and you kick your feet, and you know, so on and so forth. Whereas this, we were kind of like, people would send me a link to like a YouTube video, or like, hey, your gain's too high, or you know, that kind of thing. Like that would mainly Mark, you know. But
thank you, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Not to discredit anything that guy's done.
Right.
But when it came down to like actually doing this part of it, like it was freeing in a way. Like it was just like there's not really rules. Nobody's telling us what kind of boundaries. There were no lines to color. Like we were just free to do. Very abstract.
To be formless.
Yeah, very much so. Good point.
Yeah, and that was so you have more on that?
No. I mean, it was just like, here you go. Jumping out of the airplane without a parachute. Let's go.
And I think sometimes that's the best way to do things. Like as I was saying before we realized we weren't recording, I was in the middle of saying that you go to learn swimming lessons, like you were saying, and you go to hire a teacher to teach you how to do it. So the teacher is kind of like your mentor, so to speak. Well, we didn't have somebody that sat down with us and said, we didn't have anybody that sat down with us and said, okay, here's how you podcast. Here's how you cast. Do this, don't do that. Never do this. Talk about that. Yeah, and all that stuff. And we didn't have anyone to do that. And I think that's fine. If anything, I think that's a positive. It's self-discovery. We've kind of figured this thing out, roundabout way ourselves. And importantly to me, when I look at those things, is we have those little mistakes, like, hey, you need to turn up your game, type things. Whereas we have those mistakes that were learned real world, from actual mistakes. Versus, it's nice to have a mentor that says, do this, don't do this, never do that, don't, do this. And when you're taught those things, those lessons, like when the mentor has those lessons and says, oh, hey, don't do this thing, because don't move your arm like this when you're trying to learn how to swim, because you won't as effectively move yourself through the water. And I did that for years. But what that is, I'm not saying I did, but the mentor might say, I swam incorrectly for years, right? Before I learned how to properly do it. The wrong technique. And so, but that mentor, because they did that and they did things the wrong way.
They already made that mistake for you.
They made that mistake for you, which is both a positive and a negative, because they have that time or that experience that says, don't do this because this isn't the right way. And so they understand it in a deeper way than the pupil or the student does, because the student never made that mistake.
Or like, the stove's hot, don't touch it.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you don't touch the stove, you don't know what hot is.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Like, you touch the stove, you know what hot is.
Don't touch the stove.
On an intimate level, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, that's what hot is.
Like when I was a kid, they always said we had electric fences for the horses and the cattle, and they say, don't touch that fence.
Yeah.
And then, well, one day I accidentally touched it for whatever reason, and
found out what that electric fence does.
That's why you don't touch it, zap. So, and again, how far do you want to take this? Okay, jumping out of an airplane without a parachute will kill you. And, like, oh, I got to go find that out for myself. Like how far do you take that?
There's obviously an extreme there. You don't need to experience that for yourself.
Yeah. But it's nice to branch out and just to do things consistently. That's what I would say is the key word, consistently. And we recorded podcasts and we just did it and didn't have anyone telling us what to do or how to do it. And we've really figured it out in a good way.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's been really cool, and it's been fun, and it's been it's made me sit and contemplate, like really think about topics and things, and like there's more to it than what I originally thought. There's more to stuff, and it's like it's allowed me to sit down and go, okay, let's really draw this out. Let's dig a little deeper and what does this mean? And it's allowed me to think about things in another way.
It's a lot of self-reflecting.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's kind of like chess. Like, have you ever played chess?
Yeah.
Okay. If it takes a long time to learn. You got to memorize like what each piece can do, and they can each do individual things that the other pieces can't do. And then once you learn the basics, it's about learning how they work together, right? Like it's really it's a simple game that has a lot of depth. And then you delve deeper into that. You learn combinations, like pieces that move together in conjunction. Like if I move my pawn here, I need to move my knight behind it to cover, and that kind of thing. But then you learn like even deeper. You go openings and closings and the Scandinavian or Sicilian opens. There's all sorts of there's books written on like just how to start the game and like how to what they call the opening, and it's that part I find really interesting for me. Like it's just given me that like, okay, hang on, there's more to it than just that. Like whereas before I might like glance at something or like, oh wow, that's cool. Well, why is it cool?
Oh,
you know
why.
What I mean? Like the why, yeah, that why is more important now, I would say. Yeah.
That's definitely, I think, as we get older, the why becomes more important. Like when I was in my 20s, the why this thing works, or why this thing doesn't work, or why this is good, or why. I call it the why.
Yeah.
The why. The WHY. The why. Why is this so? Why does this work? And I noticed when I was in my 20s that was an important thing to my dad, was the why.
Why are you doing it that way?
Yeah, why. And even in my teens, even in my teens, the why. He was real big on the why. And then I got in the 20s, it was still the why. And now that I'm in my late 30s, I could see like, oh, okay, like now I'm starting to wonder about the why.
Yeah. It was like, God, I don't care. I just want to get this thing done.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay.
Yeah. So, but the kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about today was with the podcast. I mean, here we are in episode 70, and one of the biggest whys we've gotten this far has been the consistency.
Yeah.
Consistently doing it, consistently showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that we had this big giant leap to get from this stepping stone, the M stepping stone, to the N, or then the O and then the P, those stepping stones. It wasn't a big leap. It was just these little consistent steps in front of each other, one after the other, just consistently coming and having fun grinding out these podcasts.
Yeah, showing up.
Walking through the door. I did a podcast on that.
Yeah.
What was that, like a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Probably 2 years ago. Yeah, yeah.
Walking through the door.
And
showing up.
Yeah, and and sometimes the enthusiasm is really high. And then sometimes it's not as high as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But like doing it anyway, because it's what you committed to.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of that translates to martial arts.
All of it.
Walking through the door, you got to show up. And then you also have to do the work regardless of how you feel about it at that time. And that goes with a lot of things. Starting a good habit.
Mm-hmm.
You got to show up. You got to do it. And even if you don't feel like it, sometimes you got to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, like, that's one of the things I think martial arts has taught me. Like, show up, do the work. And it's irrelevant how you feel about it at that time. If you feel great about it, that's awesome, all the better. If you don't feel great about it, it doesn't matter that you don't feel great. You need to, if you want to improve, that's part of the struggle,
And then that's part of the struggle, and it's your history and your struggle that
Yeah.
you get to talk about one day, or
Yeah,
2 years from now on the podcast or something.
Exactly. No, when we got together and we were talking about what we were going to talk about today, I was like, I can't think of what lessons I've applied to my life from martial arts. Like right at that moment when we were talking about it, you had a couple ideas, and I was just like, I can't think of anything, but I'm sure that when we sit down and record, I'll have something. And one thing just came to me. There was a point, and I've talked about this in teaching a few times, but there was a point when I had got my purple belt, or my advanced purple belt. I didn't get the techniques. I didn't understand. Like for me to feel like I have something, like I understand something, like really understand it, I have to know the why. Mm-hmm. Why am I doing it like this? Why am I doing this like that? What's the purpose? For me to feel like I can do it, I have to understand those things. And it got to a point where I was contemplating, like just walking away, just quitting. And I didn't want to do that for a number of different reasons. One, it was martial arts, like really, like I tell people it saved me, it fixed me. It changed my outlook on life. It made me a complete person. Like it made me a better father. It made me a better human being, more patient, more understanding of others. I don't fly off the handle as much. Like I feel like I'm more in control of who I am, and things don't bother me like they used to. I have an anxiety problem where large crowds of people or loud noise, like a busy shopping center or supermarket, will make me crazy. Like I've walked out of Winco so many times when I first got married. It's not funny. Like I literally would I can't handle this. I'm done.
You're out.
We're out. We're going to Safeway.
I had that experience like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I went in there and I was like, this place is too crowded and too loud. Yeah, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But now I can look around and go, this isn't that big of a deal. And I can talk myself down most of the time. But anyway, so I'm purple belt, advanced purple belt. I can't remember exactly where I was, but I'm learning these techniques, and I can't grasp it. They don't make sense, and I'm getting really frustrated with it. And I'm to the point where I'm like, okay, I either need to figure out how this works, or I need to find something else, because this just doesn't make sense to me. And so it took me it took me a few months. So I was coming down, and I hadn't told anybody about it. I hadn't talked to anybody. I didn't talk to the teacher, I didn't talk to friends about it. I didn't talk to my wife about it. I was just kind of like this internal struggle, and I didn't know how to broach the subject with anybody. I was a little embarrassed by it, and I didn't know how to figure it out. So I was just internally just
roiling,
and I just decided, okay, I'm going to try something different every time I come to class until I figure this out. And so sometimes I would be in the back room. I'd show up a little early, and I'd go practice in front of the mirrors, and I'd try it on my left side. I'd try it in reverse, and I'm doing all the little tricks, and nothing's working, and I'm just getting more and more agitated by this whole thing. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to practice until I get it. Well, it just wasn't gelling. And then, and it had to do with punching. There's certain techniques, and basically it was a punch, and I couldn't make them work. So I was like, okay, that's it. And then one of the classes we went to was just all sparring. And I'm like, I'm going to use nothing but these techniques no matter what, until I can figure out how this works. And it took a lot of getting punched in the face and the gut and everywhere else until I was like, okay, my hands need to be here when I throw this punch, so I'm covered, so I don't eat that shot from the right side. This is why we do it like that, and it's slowly like grabbing those puzzle pieces and go, okay, these two don't fit, grab another one. That one kind of fits, grab another. Oh, that's how that, and it just started to slowly like come together. And then I got past it and moved on and figured it out. But I think that right there, that lesson was probably one of the single most important lessons that I learned from martial arts and applied that to my life. And I'll tell another little story about my son Hunter, who is an amazing kid, in my opinion. I think he's pretty amazing. But he took to school like a duck to water. Like, he has always gotten really good grades. He's very studious, does his homework, all of that stuff. I never did. Like, I shouldn't have graduated high school. I flunked out of college 3 times. I was not a good student. Okay. Like that, I'm the poster child for not good student.
Okay.
And he, when he was younger, he was struggling with something, and I can't remember what it was, but I was telling him this huge, long story of trying to relate to him. And I'm like, like when you're really studying for a test in school and you just don't get it, and you just got to work, and you make flashcards, and I'm giving him all these details and stuff. And he just looks at me after about 30 seconds of talking. He goes, I don't have that problem. And it's like, I got nothing for you, kid. Sorry, I can't help you, But what this taught me, what that specific thing taught me, was that, like, you need to look at things from a different angle. You need to take a different approach. And you need to have the patience to understand that sometimes you're not going to get that right away. Mm-hmm. And that it's okay that that's part of your process for learning. And sometimes the struggle is part of that. And it's not always going to come easy to you. And sometimes you just have to, you got to slog through that mud before you get to that other side of that, whatever it is. You know what I mean? And so that is, I think, probably the most important lesson that I've gotten so far out of martial arts.
Wow.
That was a whole lot to say, but to get to that point.
No, yeah. So you're saying that showing up to class like you were doing and trying something new every time, that was what kind of, then you eventually figured out the why.
Yeah. Like I figured it out, and I had help. It wasn't like I figured it all out on my own, but what I think it boiled down to was I didn't have the experience of doing it. And it was one of those things where, like, it doesn't matter how much teaching you have or how much you try, but you have to put the time in. And up until that point, it was like I could watch you do something, I could watch Sensei Court do something, I could watch, another student do that, and kind of like put the two pieces together and figure it out. And that wasn't too much of a struggle. Your small little corrections here and there, and you kind of figure it out as you go.
Right.
Whereas this was like more abstract and more like trying to describe the color blue to somebody who's colorblind.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, now we're going to talk about how that makes you feel and how that makes you, whatever. I don't know. But it didn't, for whatever reason with me, it just didn't connect. And I was like, okay, I'm hard-headed enough to just keep ramming my head into this problem and like it doesn't fit. Like how many times do I need to do this until it fits? And it wasn't going to, probably, if I had continued on that path, until I was like, okay, let's try another approach finally, after however long struggling with it, So I think it kind of just showed me, like, when things get a little bit tough, that there's another path.
Mm-hmm.
There's another route around your issue. Mm-hmm. And maybe you need to look at it from a different perspective. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. What when you had the like, sometimes I like to think that you had those moves you wanted to practice, mm-hmm. right? So you were showing up to class consistently. Sometimes, do you think that, like, at least I think sometimes what I have to do, and maybe some other people have to do, is we want to understand something, the why, mm-hmm. the why of why something works. It's almost like you need experience doing those punches. Then you need to get a certain amount of experience. Then you start thinking about the why. Or do you need the why up front? Like, you've never done ballet, and the ballet teacher says, well, this is how you stand on your tippy toes, and this is why you do it.
Yeah.
And you instantly get it, right? You're like, oh, I got it. Like, now I've just got to do it, and my body's got to toughen up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, yeah. Well, there's a purpose.
There's a purpose.
There's a purpose for this. And that was like, I couldn't grasp that purpose. And therefore the why.
The why, yeah.
I couldn't understand those two things, and it was like, why am I doing it like this? What is the purpose of this? And I had to search for that. Like,
yeah.
That and it wasn't that, like, anybody hadn't explained it to me. I just didn't get it. My thick head was like, that's dumb. Why do you want to do it like that? And it's not like a jab. The jab's pretty self-explanatory. It's fast. It's a probing shot. It can be used as a lead up to a combination. There's all these other reasons for it. There's like all sorts of hundreds of reasons why you throw jabs. This was more of a rare thing. Like, you're not going to use these constantly. This isn't something that happens all the time. It's a once in a blue moon kind of thing. And it didn't gel. And it's not something that I go back to and use all the time, but it's something I can do and I can pull off, and I understand, more importantly, how and why to use it. But that wasn't the lesson. The lesson was more about figuring the problem out and, like, how to go about it, instead of like cussing and screaming at the air and like just frustrated. It was like, there's a smoother transition here, and you just got to figure out what that smoother transition is. Mm-hmm. And so that, I think, is applied to my personal life in ways which, holy cow, like problems at work or problems at home or just everyday issues that I come across. It makes me kind of reflect back and go like, are you sure you're doing that the right way? Like, is there maybe another option that you haven't thought of yet? So it makes me kind of step back and get out of my own way sometimes, and like look around.
Interesting. So with the why, you know what I'm saying? Like what I was saying with the question was, so for you had the lesson wasn't so much, the lesson was like you were saying, your lesson was figuring out, how did you word it? The lesson was figuring out a different angle, or figuring out
like,
a different,
like, instead of like just banging your head against the wall, like, why can't I figure this problem out? Like, maybe take a break and step back and go, is there another way around the wall, or should we just run right into it again? For the 10th time,
yeah.
You know?
I mean, we're putting a little bit deeper dent in it.
Yeah. Eventually, we might break through. A couple hundred more shots into this wall.
After your head's broken.
Maybe let's look for the ladder that's over here. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It made the problem not so big, for one, and then it made it also like look for other options, like look around.
Yeah.
Maybe. And if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have asked for more help too, and not been so ego driven. Because I think ultimately it boiled down to like, I don't need to ask for help, you know, because I could have gotten it from anyone in this building. Like would have been like, oh yeah, here's what you need to do. And I could have solved this problem instead of internalizing it and like mulling over it and just like, struggle, you know. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Like that's not an uncommon problem.
Oh, us guys, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
But so the interest. Oh, do you have
No.
more?
Go for it.
The interesting thing on that is to get to that point where you were ramming your head in the wall and saying, "Oh, okay, now I need to look around and see where's the ladder. Hey, what about that ladder over there?"
Yeah.
That's so interesting because that problem that you hopped on this path and you said, I'm going to do martial arts, and you went down this path a certain length and then you hit that wall.
Yeah.
And then you said, oh wait, like here, and then you started figuring out, okay, I need to look around for the ladder. And the nice thing about that is okay, so my question is, if you would have asked somebody, do you think if you would have asked somebody and said, hey, this wall that I'm running into, do you think it would have been as rewarding to you if you would have asked somebody else what to do to get through your wall?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I probably would have ran into it again.
A couple more, yeah.
A couple, you know,
How many?
a little bit down the road. Eventually, I think I would have hit it again. But it might not have been with martial arts. It could have been with some other aspect of my life. But yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, I probably would have hit that wall again somewhere, somehow. I would have come across that problem again.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. There's walls at every stop. What I was saying is, do you think it would have been more rewarding and satisfying if you would have asked someone else for help? And they would have said, well, there's the ladder over there. Yeah. That's how you get over the wall.
Dingus, this is how you do it.
Or do you think it would have been more rewarding that you hit the wall and then you looked around yourself and said, man, I got to start looking around?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think it would have been. I don't know if it would have been or not. I suppose in the right context, with the right help, it might have been. But I think it was something I personally had to figure out for myself.
That's what I was thinking.
Because I had a little bit of help. I had people like willing to help me and explain things to me and be like, okay, no, you need to be up here on your toes, on the balls of your feet, not on your heels. You need to, your hands need to be here and there. And those little guidelines or goalposts were helpful. But I still didn't like grasp it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you take Spanish in high school, you learn Spanish, but you don't really know Spanish. Like you could go to Mexico and you could probably communicate a little bit, but like you're not gonna understand, or they're not gonna understand. Like it's not the same. Like you're not immersed in it.
Yeah. And
I think I really had to just like put myself in it over and over again, and just kind of like, I'm only going to learn this from experience, kind of thing,
That just goes back to what I was saying. Yeah, not to interrupt, but that was what I was saying, is that immersion of you finding that problem out for yourself, that conveys a whole deeper why understanding.
Yeah. I don't think it would have meant the same to me had I had gotten help.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It was like a lesson that was like, oh, like this light bulb moment was like, you know, that was like an important thing. I remember it and I go back to it and I tell the story to people when they get there, because I think everyone can relate to that, because like you may not meet that problem the same time or the same place that I did, but eventually in somebody's life, they're going to hit that problem.
Yeah.
They're going to hit a problem like that somewhere in their life, and they will have to figure that out either on their own or with somebody's help. You know, and I kind of think like as a martial artist, you should help others that are training to get through those problems. But as a human being and just doing the right thing as a human being, like I think it's our job is that to be like, hey, dude, you're my friend. I care about you. I made this mistake. Watch out for that.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. You know, maybe I'm off base there, but I that's what I feel like. That's how we should interact with each other.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, because then if that didn't happen, then from the beginning of the world, nobody,
Yeah, we'd
everyone
all
would
be in our own little corner,
making
know?
the same mistakes that we're
yeah.
all making. Like,
And somebody was like, "Hey, this fire's warm.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
check it
yeah,
out.
Yeah.
Makes food taste good too." You know.
You don't have to be cold always.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Like, so that's the other extreme, right? Yeah. No, but it's those. Yeah, it's almost there's a sweet spot somewhere between finding things out for strictly on your own, right?
Mhm.
Your own efforts, your own devices, you found it out on your own, versus somebody else telling you, okay, this is how you live your life, this is how you train, this is how you do this punch.
Mhm.
You do this, and you don't deviate from this, and you follow this path exactly,
Yeah.
right? And there's like, there's somewhere between that. It may not be in the middle, it may be towards one side or the other, but there's like a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And like when you found that out yourself and you said, oh, I need to pick up that ladder over there
Yeah.
and go over, wasn't it so much more satisfying?
It definitely was, and like I said, I don't think it would have been as impactful had I had the help.
Yeah.
Like I did have, and I want to be clear, I did have help. Like I had it here and there, but I didn't go out seeking it. Like I didn't go to you and be like, Tyler, I need help. Help me figure out how to make this work. You
Right.
know, I mean, there were other things that I definitely did, but it was more, and I think a lot of it just had to do with my own internal BS. Like I was just struggling over it, and my own ego wouldn't let me go to anyone or like ask for help more. And again, now if I had to do that all over again, I'd be like, hey, dude, can you come over here for a minute and just show me how to do it? You know what I mean? Like now it's like no big deal. I don't know how to do this. Help me figure it out. But I had to get through that to figure out for myself that it's okay to like get help. if I need it. Or to step back and go, let me scratch my head on this for a minute. There's another way to figure this out, and you're just kind of going about it maybe the wrong way, or you're looking at it from the wrong angle. You need to like sit down for a second, or climb on this ladder, or look around the corner. You know.
And that is such a valuable gift to have, to step back and be like, you can step back, you hit that wall and you take a step back, and maybe you try a few different things to get around that wall, under that wall, over that wall, through that wall, however, and you hit that, and then you step back, and then you say, I found myself stepping back and saying, okay, do I need to go ask someone for help, or do I need to look up on my phone, and ask the internet, or do I just need to figure this out myself? Like, can I figure this thing out myself? And I've gotten to that point now in my life where I'm like, I'll do that. I won't just immediately say, no, I can figure it out.
Yeah.
Or no, I need to go ask someone for help. I'll step back and be like, okay, do I think I can figure this out myself? Like, I was having an issue with my washing machine the other day, and I was like, I know I can figure this out. Like this, I don't need to call a
Service center, a repair guy.
A repair guy and pay more for the repair than I paid for the washing machine, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, there's got to be a simple solution to this. And I Googled it, and sure enough, all it was, I needed a flathead screwdriver to unscrew a screw a little bit more. Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. And that it was a simple solution on without going into too much detail on the dryer or the washer. But it was simple, and I just it was satisfying to figure it out. But I actually stopped and I took a step back and I said, man, okay, do I need to call someone? Do I need a new washer? Or can I figure this out myself? And I Googled it and I figured it out myself. And luckily I had the Google, right? To ask that question.
You probably could have figured it out. It just would have taken longer.
Well, that one possibly, yeah. That the solution to the washing machine was the discharge drain, where it drains all the dirty water. I'd had that shoved too far in, or not too far in another hose, and then that hose went further away and drained out of the washing machine.
Yeah.
But the screw, I had a what are those things you screw like on a hose? It's like
a hose clamp.
A hose clamp. Connecting the two pieces, and I had that cinched too tight. And when you have that cinched too tight,
you squeeze the hose.
It squeezes the hose, but what actually happens is it creates a suction pressure inside the hose that will suck the water out of the washing machine. That while it's trying to fill your washing machine, it'll fill the washing machine. But if you've got that thing clamped too tight, it can create, and there might already be other water in the lines.
It creates like a vacuum.
It creates a vacuum and pulls the water that you need that water in the washing machine to wash your clothes. Otherwise, you hear the washing machine going and they're just some wet clothes because it filled up and it drained all the water out before the cycle finished.
Okay.
And so anyway, that was something that could have caused, they're like, oh, well, your water pump inside your washing machine, I think that's the correct term, your water pump could be bad and just be open all the time. And so that as soon as the water drains in, it's just draining right out. Oh. That could have gone bad. But instead it was that suction on that. And I was like, I didn't know that, did you? No. So that's one of those, like, I don't know if I would have found that one out.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So
I would have thought to loosen
the hose clamp. Yeah. So usually you use the hose clamp to clamp things so tight that there is no leak. But in this case, you want a little bit of an air leak in it.
Huh.
And so anyway, so I figured that out. I won't forget that lesson.
Yeah.
But the thing is I figured that out. Ultimately, I guess you could say I figured it out on my own, because I was like, well, what's going on here? And Googled it and went through a few different pages. And I was like, this is what my washing machine's doing. It's draining before it's gone through a whole cycle. Mm-hmm. And it's draining even before it fills up all the way when you put the soap and the water in. And so then I worked my way through. But it was so satisfying, and I got done with that, and I was like, you know what? I will never forget that. Yeah. Because I found that out on my own, and I found that out through trial and error, and I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
You know,
that stays with you.
That one stays with me, just like you having to work through it by hitting the wall. That stays with you.
Yeah, I see what you're saying now. Like, I don't know how much more impactful that would have been. Maybe with the right teacher it could have been.
Yeah.
But I was too dense to even go to the teacher, right? Like, at least you were smart enough to pull up the phone and go, hey, let's Google this, you know?
Let's see what the issue is. Yeah, so I remember to this day, I still have to work hard at a couple of the kicks where we spin around, like our back kick and our spinning reverse. And I was having problems with the back kick, and I thought it was a balance issue. And then one day, it was when Sensei Blue was out here, and this was right before, 6 months before our black belt test.
Oh, okay, when we brought him out.
We brought Sensei Blue out. So our teacher, Sensei Court, his teacher is Sensei Blue. and we organized for him to come out and teach from Wisconsin.
You should do that.
Yep, I agree. And so I absolutely agree.
Sensei Blue, if you're listening, we need to get together and clear your schedule.
So you can come out again.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and so I was having problems with my back kick, and I did a private lesson with Sensei Blue, and he's like, "Well, what do you want to go over?" And I told him, "Oh, I'm having an issue with this." And he's like, "Oh, well, that's where your hands are. As you're spinning around and doing your kick, you keep your hands close to your head, and they're like, you keep your fists close to your face as you're spinning, and your fists are like planets orbiting your face." And so ever since then, I've had no problems with. I mean, I still have to work at it. But it's hard to demonstrate right now.
Exactly.
Sitting down, but yeah. So that was an example of I was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here and why I'm doing this, and I had asked a couple other people, and I got maybe you need to tighten up your core, and that was probably part of it too. Tighten up your core as you're spinning around, or you've got to just balance on one foot, more. And so I'd gotten pieces from other people that helped out, but it was really that piece of advice about him saying your fists orbit your face or your head as you're turning around. You don't throw your hands all the way out like to where they're almost extended from your body. You keep them in close just during the spin, and that fixed it for me. And I don't know if I would have figured that out on my own.
Yeah,
maybe eventually.
I think that's like one of the little fine details that comes with like just years and years of teaching, and like seeing all different body types and different personalities doing these things.
Yep.
And just like, oh, you know what I mean? Like that's totally seeing it from a whole other perspective or another angle. I've seen this literally thousands of times from thousands of different students, and like, here you go. Like that whole transaction probably took what, a minute, if that.
Not even, if that.
He probably watched you do that about 3 times and was like, "Oh, do this." You're like, "Oh, holy cow!"
Yep.
Those are fun moments.
Yeah, and see that's another moment where that was the one where somebody else just had the answer, and they showed me, and it's so easy because, it's so nice because that moment, I remember it. It's distinct. It's just as distinct as the other moment, a couple days ago with the washing machine, figuring it out on my own versus figuring it out with an instructor who's like, "Oh yeah, just do it like this." And that's one of those nice things where I don't want to spend however long grinding out on my own time figuring out this little problem, whereas the teacher's just like, "Oh, you just put your hands here and that fixes the problem." Right? Do I really want to grind out weeks and weeks trying to figure this out? And
and like, I don't think you can go through your whole life with somebody telling you how to do everything.
Absolutely not.
I don't think it would work.
Nope.
You would not be the person you are.
Right.
There are certain things that you have to grind out. Like
yourself.
You've got to slog through that mud and get to the other side on your own. There are just things that, like, the experience matters.
Experience matters. Yeah.
And that's the other side. Like, how do you define a master? Like, somebody who can look at something like that and be like, "Oh, fix it like this."
While you're slogging through the mud, the master might be, from the other side that you're slogging towards, he might be like, "Hey, cinch up your backpack a little tighter on your left side."
Lace up your boots, dummy.
Lace up your boots, he's over there talking at you.
Yeah.
So that's, but it's such a paradox, right? Because we want to figure things out on our own, but then we also want help, right? It's one of those.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with where we're at in this time, because we have so much stuff and so much, we have access to so much information. It's like when you do come across that problem, it's like, well, why can't I just figure this out? Because everything else I can just, is at my fingertips. As long as I got a connection to the internet, I can find out like that. How come I can't figure this out? You know? Whereas like 100 years ago, I don't think that would have been such a concern. Like, I think people understood that differently because it might take you weeks to get that information, you know, or if it was even available. Like, you know, in the days before the internet, if you didn't have an encyclopedia, your rear end was going down to the library. And hopefully they had one that was somewhat current, you know?
Yeah. To be fair, they didn't have washing machines back 100 years ago like they did.
Yeah.
More complicated society, yeah.
But like
the principle's
the same.
Yeah,
you know?
correct.
Like, you know, with the internet, you pretty much can figure out almost any question pretty quickly. It's like when you can't, you almost feel like, well, how come I can't get the answer?
Yeah, how come I can't just find the answer?
Yeah.
Why doesn't it just fix itself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the one thing I wanted to touch on too on the why is sometimes the why. As I get older, I want to figure out the why. You know, why does tightening down the hose clamp on my washing machine cause suction that causes, you know, the water to drain out? Like, why does that work? But then other times, the why has gotten more important to me as I've gotten older, and I noticed that as in older people, especially older men, the why is very important, right? When we were younger, we wasn't so concerned about the why. Yeah, we're curious when we're kids. Why does this work or why did that? But we just want the TV to turn on, right? We just want to watch our cartoons. We don't want to know why I've got to plug in the antenna and then why, and then how the electrons and the cables come out of the receptacle and power the TV and all that, or whatever those things are called, right? Like,
that's not important.
Yeah,
as long as I get the TV and cartoons, I'm good.
Yeah. So the why so much isn't a big deal. But as we get older, it seems to be, I mean, I can only imagine in 10 years where I'll be like, the why will be more important. I don't know, maybe not. But I notice sometimes in life, you don't have time to figure out the why. When I was in the military, a lot of times you had certain things you had to learn how to do, like learn a piece of equipment or a certain training technique. And a lot of times or for example, if you're a student in a classroom in a math class in high school or even in college, you may not get a concept of how like a multiplication problem is done, right? And so you raise your hand, you say, well, how does that work? And then this teacher explains it, and you still don't get it. But the rest of the class does, and the rest of the class is getting bored, and they want to move on, and the teacher's losing control. But you're that one person that says, well, I still don't understand. At some point in those instances, you just got to put the why on the back burner.
And like, I'm going to figure this. I'll figure out the why part in a second.
I have to figure the why out in a later. I don't understand it right now, but I have to put it on the side for now, the back burner, for the sake of moving along. And I've noticed, at least in my life, that's been really important, where there's just sometimes I don't understand the why. And if I sit there and try to figure it out, you're stuck. And then, you might have to move forward a little bit over here, then move forward a little bit over here. Then by doing that, you learn the why over here, which then allows everything to be brought to the same level, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I can imagine, like you were saying about the military earlier, I can imagine they don't have time to take every single person that doesn't fit in that mold and go, okay, guy, this is how you need to do this, and this is why. No. Figure it out. If you don't understand it right now, you'll figure it out. It'll become clear in a minute. But right now, we're moving the whole crew along.
You don't have
especially in combat. Or you're going to be in combat. Like, we don't have time to figure this out. Here you go. Here's your stuff. Go to that hill.
Do this. Yeah. I had a team leader that I'm still real good friends with, lives in town, and we stay in contact all the time. But he was my team leader, and when he was first in charge of me, he said, Tyler, he's like, you always I would tell you to do something and you would ask why do we gotta do that? And he's like, and I would just tell you, go do it. I don't have time to explain the why we are doing this. And I don't even know the why, but we just that's our orders. Like, you know, so, and he, every once in a while he'll joke about that. And that's a nice lesson that I think I learned, and I think sometimes other people need to learn, is sometimes you don't get the why and you just have to do it, and you're going to figure it out.
You'll see the why later.
And you just have to be comfortable not knowing the answer. And that's been a big lesson, and I think that's a big lesson for a lot of people, including me. That's a hard lesson to digest, because we want the why we're doing something, and sometimes we just have to do it, and it's all context dependent, right?
Well,
and situation,
exactly,
right? So obviously, so it just depends on what your activity is or what you're trying to learn. But that's the flip side that I've learned, is I'm like, oh man, and I try to tell people that these days, like sometimes, like working on movie sets, time is money on a movie set, and in a lot of jobs, you know, time is money. And people, you get a lot of egos on a movie set, and one, you might accomplish the same goal, but they've got two different ways of they want to do it, two different paths they want to do it, and telling people, no, just do it this way, and they're like, but why? And it's like, I don't have time to explain the why. Can you just go set that light up over there and do it this way? Like, yeah. And it's really because that's the other side of the coin. Is we want to know the why, but sometimes we just got to do it without knowing why.
Yeah, sometimes the why isn't as important.
Right now.
It might be important to you or me, but it's not important with the project. It's not important to, you know, that will come.
That will come. The answer will come.
Yeah.
Paradox again.
So many times. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, what do you think about it?
No, I think that's great. That's great. That relates so well.
Yeah.
To that.
Did you ever have that experience in a classroom where somebody didn't get a math problem or a science?
Dude, that was me, like every other day.
Me
school.
too.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the class moved on and they're figuring out how to do this complex.
And you're looking around going, am I the only one that doesn't understand this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it stinks. It stinks.
It's terrible. You're like, am I the only dummy on planet Earth that doesn't get this?
I had good teachers that for the most part, if I can remember correctly, they would be like, hey, it's okay, I'll get with you afterwards and explain.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I had one teacher that's like, it's okay that you're not understanding why. Just chill out for a minute. Just follow along. If you have a problem, I'll help you out as we go through. It'll come clear, and it'll be like flipping on a light switch. Just hang on. You're in the dark right now. Don't worry about it, you know. That was when he was being nice. Other times he'd be like, just shut up and sit down. You know? You're on a ride right now. Hang on. But no, I think that applies to so many different things.
Yeah, and that's and it's hard to tell in my experience. It's hard to tell when you've got to figure out the why,
or when to let it go,
for now. And that's a intensely personal thing. That's context and situation dependent.
Yeah.
You know, that type of stuff. But the other flip side of that is knowing the why. When you know the why and you know why you're doing something or why something works, man, doesn't it click?
Oh yeah.
It clicks so hard.
And like, exactly. Yeah. And it's just like, it not only does it click, but it's like being able to spot, like, okay, when you're out in the hills and you see a deer before anyone else, it's like, bang, right there. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? Where's it at? What? Oh, you know, and it's like having that kind of connection, like that happens. Like transition from one thing to the next, like when you understand how all of that works, it's just like, oh, it's not a hurdle, it's not a problem. It's just like one foot in front of the other, baby. You know?
And it's smooth.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. When I spot a buck and I'm with my friends, I'm like, I spot a buck and I'll be like, hey guys, look at that other hill over there. Like, no, I don't do that. But
That's what depends. Are you hunting?
Hey guys, like, take your binoculars, look over at that other hill. I'll look at this one. Pow!
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'm just kidding. I'm not like that. But yeah, that's. I think that's what I have to say on that subject. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I think we're good there. I think we're good. Hey, friends, thank you for being along on this ride with us through 70 episodes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with us. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. And hopefully you continue on to ride with us for 70 more episodes and beyond. If you like what we had here to say, please give us a shout out on social media. We're on the Instagram, Formless Pod. We have a Facebook group called the Formless Pod. We have an email address. You can email us your thoughts at theformlesspod@gmail.com. We have a website, formlesspod.com. And also we have stuff to sell you, so you don't have to walk around naked. We have shirts, sweaters, hats, backpacks, bags, stickers. I think that's everything. If not, if there's something that you want with our logo on it, let me know. We can put it on there, I'm sure. Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful evening. That's good.
Button.
Oh, yeah, please. Sorry.